We're up to chapter 26 on the course, and just a few announcements. If you're watching this before late January, I'm going to Florida the last 2 weeks of January to do talks, and you can find that on our website about what city and when. And then in the International Congress on A Course in Miracles, as I said earlier, is April 8, 9, 10 in Las Vegas. If you'd like to sign up for that, there's a notice about it and a flyer about it. And also in March, the last 2 weeks in March, we're taking a group of folks to Costa Rica. Somebody else is the tour leader. There's two tour guides that are going with us, and we're going to study A Course in Miracles for a couple of hours each day, and then the rest of the time we're just going to do zip lining and visit the rainforests and go to the beaches and stuff like that. You can read about that in here as well. So I think that's all of our advertising, and let's get into chapter 26. So as you know, as you begin to progress in the course, it becomes progressively more and more beautiful. More and more kind of clearly written, more and more poetic. We find more and more of the iambic pentameter, simply is, which consists of 10 syllables with broken into 5-metered beats. Helen loved Shakespeare. Shakespeare is often written this way. Helen, interestingly enough, was not a big reader, but she did read Shakespeare, and she did read the Bible, and of course she read all the psychology stuff, but she wasn't a novel reader, that kind of a thing. And she got more and more clear and more receptive, I guess you could say. The most difficult parts of the course are actually the first 5 chapters, or the first 5 or 6 chapters, in terms of there's Helen got mixed in there with it. So actually when it was completed, Ken and Helen and others were looking through it, and they literally went back through sentence by sentence and asked Jesus, is this what you want, or would you like this to be expressed another way? And so there was a lot of cleaning up that had to happen in those early chapters. People sometimes find out about there's an original edition, and my God, we've been denied this information, but really there's no difference between the original edition and the edition that we study here from the Foundation for and not in terms of what the Course says. There's really nothing different there. So chapter 26, it's interesting. It's one of the few chapters in which the Course on a few occasions talks about itself and can talk about what it's teaching, and it talks about the process that we're going through in the Course. The process, by the way, is, first of all, the Course is kind of a form of jnana yoga. By that we mean we are trying to understand. We have to use our intellect, our mind here to grasp these concepts. The word that the Course uses is reason, as opposed to unreasonableness or the insanity, which characterizes the way that the ego works. And then the second part is putting these principles into practice, which is one of the reasons that I had invited Chris to come last time, because he could provide a demonstration of ways in which we can put these principles into practice. I think a lot of what we need with the Course is, I'm sure some of us are psychologists in the room, you're familiar with cognitive behavior therapy. And I think that's really the process that we need to apply here. The cognitive part is that we understand what's happening, what's going on. We look, the first one of Ken's bigger emphasis, look at how insane you are. Look at what's going on in your mind, which keeps you insane. begin to think about ways that you can stop that, and then begin to go into another direction. But that becomes the behavior. So then we apply the principles to the practice of what we do. A very simple, easy illustration of that is Chris was talking about things that he wanted to see differently at the beginning of the year. One thing that probably happens with a lot of folks is that we think about these bodies and how much they weigh. And so we may think about changing that a little bit. So the first thing is you got to want to do it. I mean, the first thing is you got to be willing to make the change. You got to look at that. And then B, you got to do something. And it really doesn't matter what you do so much as that you do put some kind of practice into practice. There are all kinds of, the world is filled with a variety of diets. I read an article once on which is the best, and its conclusion was that they all worked. The only question is, do you do it? You know, if you do it, it will work, right? But the first thing is the doing of it, right? So that's why with the Course in Miracles we have both the text, which tells us the philosophy, the ideas. We understand that. We're going to be working on that a lot today. And then there's the application, which is the workbook. The workbook is the process by which we begin to put these principles into practice. So let's go to page 2 on your little booklets that you have handed out. And for those who are watching, these booklets are available on miraclesmagazine.org. You just go there, and it's printable, and you just hit print, and you can print it out on your own computer. So we'll start off with the sacrifice of oneness, and I'll read through, mostly I'll be just reading through the parts of the Course in here that are highlighted or either in yellow or underlined or made bold, or all three. The first section is on the sacrifice of oneness. Let me say just a word about this before I read this passage. Sometimes I think I need to learn how to do PowerPoint because I've never tried, but it would be, we've got this screen here. It would be so handy if I could do that. That's got to be a project for this year, right? Learn PowerPoint. So let's assume that we have a PowerPoint illustration here that you're just going to make up, all right? We can't write on this. And we draw a line about 3/4 of the way up here, and up above that line we have what we will call mind, capital M, or oneness, or heaven, or knowledge. Those are all kind of synonyms in terms of the Course in Miracles. And then below that we have, if you could just try to draw a few little lines here and there, it would be like we've all kind of dropped down into this other dimension, right? So there's like a little, every line, that's you, that's me, we've all dropped down into this other dimension where we don't have we're not mindful, we're not clear-minded, we do not experience oneness, we wonder what heaven is, and we may have holy instances in which we have a memory of that will come back into the mind, and we will see it for a little while, for whatever reason that may come to us. These are we call mystical experiences, or maybe that's just, you might get it just in reading the Course. You'll intuit something. You'll see part of the wholeness, right? So let me go back and read this now. In the dynamics of attack, is sacrifice a key idea? It is the pivot upon which all compromise, all desperate attempts to strike a bargain, and all conflicts to achieve a seeming balance. It is the symbol of the central theme that somebody must lose. This is the ego's way of thinking. We're talking about it now. Its focus on the body is apparent, for it is always an attempt to limit loss. The body is itself a sacrifice. Think about that for a moment now. Right? The body is itself a sacrifice, a giving up of power in the name of saving just a little for yourself. All right, so let's concentrate on this last this last line. The body is itself a sacrifice, right? So we've given up. We've gone into these. The body is obviously the symbol of separation. And everything that we see is also a symbol of separation because it's separate, it's different. It is apart from us, not a part of who we are. Going down and reading the part at the bottom of 2 and on the top of 3. To see a brother in another body separate from yours is the expression of a wish to see a little part of him and sacrifice the rest. Look at the world and you will see nothing attached to anything beyond itself. All seeming entities can come a little nearer or go a little further off, but cannot join. Now, one of the basic characteristics of a mystical experience is called, well, first of all, there's this omniscience, right? Or omnipresence, or the oceanic feeling where there's a sense of connectedness. So we're connected with everything. You do not see yourself as being separate from. That's one thing that characterizes so many mystical experiences. There's this immediacy, this presence. It's especially nice if it happens in nature, or perhaps with music, or with another human being, or with animals. It doesn't matter what it is, but there's a loss of the sense of separation. The ego essentially is a separate thing. It sees itself as being, if we will, broken off. It doesn't know what it's broken off from, but it sees itself as being broken off and therefore also isolated. And in that isolation, there is loneliness, and there is despair, and the sense of loneliness and despair, that something is missing. Just as the opposite of that is that for some reason we can kind of get back up there into that one mind, into that wholeness, into that unified state of consciousness that is joy, that is actually a state of bliss. Now, the ego doesn't see it that way. But the ego doesn't see it that way because the ego sees it that if I return to God, if I give it all back to God again, then I have lost, and God has won, and there is no longer me. And that's true. There is no longer me, you, as a separate being. I've said several times before, there will not be a Jon Mundy in heaven, right? There cannot be. We don't break it off. And there's no body there, B-O-D-Y, there. It's not a matter, it's a matter of joining. The Course says very clearly, minds can join, bodies cannot. So on the level of mind, we can join. We can become one. I remember when I first fell in love the first time, high school sweetheart, and I thought we were going to have like this one mind. There was just like, I really did. I thought it was just, it was such a wonderful experience because all you wanted to do was just give to the other. And there was just all this. This is also part of the mystical experience, is the experience of being in love or falling in love, all right? Okay. So the ego is just the opposite of that. The ego is out of love. It's actually in a state, the opposite of love, the Course says on the very, very first page, is fear. So what we got going on then is fear. Fear of God rather than the love of God. That God is somehow or another going to get us because we have separated ourselves from God. Actually, the truth of the matter is that you cannot do that except within the context of a dream. But dreams, as we know, contain no reality. So there's no reality to that. It's just a dream. And think about this planet, all these billions of people walking around dreaming all the time. So at night we have our dreams to ourselves, and then in the day we dream in concert. We dream just like we're dreaming together in a certain sense right now, right? Whatever it is that we're seeing and sharing. Okay. Let's go on a little bit. So, to the next page at the top. So the world you see is based on sacrifice of oneness. So everything in this world is split, broken, separated, and that includes us. The body makes it that way. All right? Let me read the rest of this. It is a picture of a complete disunity and total lack of joining. Remember, minds can join, bodies cannot. Around each entity is built a wall so seemingly solid that it looks as if what is inside can never reach without, and what is out can never reach and join with what is locked away within the walls. Each part must sacrifice the other part to keep itself complete. This is the whole world of competition and battles and war and who can get to the top of the heap, and that's the way the ego lives, right? It's not a matter of seeing ourselves joining, going on down. No two minds can join in the desire for love without love's joining them. So that's a nice line. So when we join in love, there's something that's greater, namely the love of God, which joins as well. Love is there. Another word we could use up at the top here is love, because the definition that every religion in the world has for God is that God is love. Right? So if God is love, God is mind, God is truth, they're all simply synonyms. And another synonym that I like a lot that's in the Course is that God is life. Life. And that's what's really exciting, because life is something which is alive, and you are alive. As a matter of fact, there's a line in the Course where it says, the mind is always working. The mind never sleeps, right? So even when we're sleeping, the mind doesn't sleep. The mind doesn't, well, part of the way that gets translated is into dreams, right? But also, even beyond the dream, there's a deeper dimension of connectedness that we probably don't remember when we wake up in the morning. But there are times when you can sort of recognize that something was going on a far deeper level, that you just sense that something was going on. Going a little further down with this. For if they joined each other, would love lose its own identity, and by their separation are their selves maintained? So we maintain ourselves by not joining. Okay, and further down. The little that the body fences off becomes the self, preserved through sacrifice of all the rest. There's a line in the Course at another point where it says, the body is a tiny fence around a great and grand idea. Idea is another word we could put up here at the top. So the body is a tiny fence. It's just this little fence that we have locked ourselves into, so to speak. There's another point in which the Course refers to the body as being a prison. So we lock ourselves into this, and then we think everything is about the body. I mean, everything is about the prison and how it looks, you know, and how we keep it, and how it functions in this world. Let's go to 5. For the sight of bodies becomes the sign that sacrifice is limited, and something still remains for you alone. And for this little to belong to you are limits placed on everything outside, just as they are on everything you think is yours. So part of the way we do that is to give definition to things by defining things, and we do the definitions, we on top of the definitions we throw our evaluations and our judgments. So good, bad, pretty, ugly, nice, not nice. It's just a form of further engaging in separation. If there's no separation there's no judgment. There's no analysis of it. It just is. It's just we might think of it as pure awareness. In the pure awareness, there is no sense of separation. There's no break, right? There is no self and other. we are so identified. There's a section in the Course where it says, think about an animal in relationship to its young. It really does not see itself as separate from the young. Right? It identifies so with the baby animal that's why the defense is total, because it's of the self of which the child is a part. Of course, the time is coming when the bird gets kicked out of the nest and the bear gets left alone or whatever it is. The time is coming when that will happen. But prior to that time coming, right? Going on down. Forgiving and receiving are the same, and to accept the limits of a body is to impose these limits on each brother whom you see. For you must see him as you see yourself. This is the same old story from Jesus. As we give so do we receive. And there is no difference. The Course is literally saying there is no difference between ourselves and each other. We've said many times before, no one here is better than anyone else. No one here is worse than anyone else. In God's eyes, we are all absolutely the same. We're all God's children, and that's the only way that it can be. So if I have any thought that somehow or another I'm better than you or worse, then I'm not seeing correctly. We see each other straight across. We don't look up and we don't look down. Going on to the next piece here. The body is a loss and can be made to sacrifice. And while you see your brother as a body, apart from you and separate in his cell, you are demanding sacrifice of him and of you. And then skip the part on the bottom there and go on to 6.
John, can I make one little comment on what you just read?
Sure.
Something really beautiful came to mind when you read that, that the one above the body is a loss. It says, forgiving and receiving are the same, and to accept the limits of the body is to impose these limits on each brother whom you see. I love that for and giving are separate, but I've always seen the truest meaning of forgiving is to give to God and to receive of Him. So for giving and receiving. To forgive is to give up and to receive.
Right.
I really love how that was split, but I got it how it was together.
Right.
Yeah, really beautiful.
Ultimately, the other kind of forgiving, the word when it's not split, forgiveness, is really going to mean that we eventually, in order to get home again, to get back to the one mind, we're going to have to forgive not our brothers and sisters. We're going to have to forgive ourselves for having created the sense of separation in the first place. That's what always is going to come down to. In fact, is if you think that some brother has done something against you, and that you had to forgive them for that, and then you actually do that, you actually engage in the forgiveness process, at that point you have a very beautiful realization, and the realization is, oh my God, I'm the one that's forgiven. I'm the one that got forgiven because I forgave. Because I let go of the idea of separation. Right? So I don't see the separation anymore. I just see us as the wholeness that is there. And that doesn't mean that people don't do things and that that we're not different. But the thing is not making a difference about the difference. The differences really don't matter. I've said here before, I'm sure you've all heard me say, well, those of you who knew have not. What's the difference between an enlightened man and an unenlightened person? The difference between an enlightened person and an unenlightened person is that the unenlightened person sees a difference. Period. All right? So there's no difference. All right? We're all exactly the same. Right? We may have different costumes that we wear and different positions that we play within this orchestra and different notes that we sing, but we're all part of the same chorus. Okay. Now let's look on the bottom of 6. Yet it, life, I'm just saying what it is, can become a treasure house as rich and limitless as heaven itself. No instant passes here in which your brother's holiness cannot be seen. Just stop and think about that one sentence. No instant passes here in which your brother's holiness cannot be seen, to add a limitless supply to every meager scrap and tiny crumb of happiness that you allot yourself. And then let's go to the borderland. Now this is an interesting, do you want to say something?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So if we can go back to page 4 for just a moment.
Okay, Michael.
John, I would like clarity because I don't think I quite understand at the top where it says the world you see is based on sacrifice of oneness.
Right.
What is the sacrifice and what is the oneness? If you can just, in a quick summary, explain
Well,
that.
the world you see is a sacrifice of oneness. So we are sacrificing this idea of oneness. We're giving up the idea of oneness.
Individual oneness or collective?
Collective.
Okay.
We're giving up on the idea that there is one, that we are just of one, and we're deciding instead that we can be, in fact, separate.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
I
that
understand.
we can. All right. Which is something actually that we can't do it, but we can try to do it. But the trying to do it is the illusion that we are separate.
Thank you.
Right. So if I have an attack thought, for example, about anyone or any situation, that's separation, isn't it? If I think someone else should be punished or killed, that's definitely separation that's going on. Or it may just be a judgment that I've got. The Course is really asking us to look very, very carefully at our judgments and become really aware of how incredibly judgmental we are. That's because judgment is separation. Love is just the opposite of separation. Love is joining. Right? So I want to look at that. I have a new CD, by the way. I forgot to mention. It's called Word Fasting, the Miracle Diet. I talked about this here once before. I only have 3 copies with me today because I shipped the rest of them to Florida. But I'll have more next time. Which is about language. It's about watching the words that come out of our mouth. Because as we speak, very clear indications of judgment and separation that just start flowing out onto the world as some sort of an attack on the world. Even though it's just an attack of an incident or attack of another individual for some little silly thing that we think that they've done, but it seems important enough for us to point it out. So that's the real question: is why is this important enough? Why does this get stuck in my craw and I have to bring it up? I have to talk about it. Well, there could be times when you would, if you're work for human resources or something, you've got to engage in evaluation processes, but that's not all our job. That's only certain people's jobs at certain times, right? And that's for the good of the whole, as a whole. But who knows? All right, let's go to the borderland of thought on top of 7. This is an interesting idea in the Course. There is a borderland of thought that stands between this world and heaven. It is not a place. And when you reach it, it is apart from time. Now, in a moment, we're going to get into the whole concept of time in the Course, which is a really, really interesting, because time is another form of separation. Right? The body is a form of separation. Space is a form of separation. That's what we were talking about a moment ago. And then time is a form of separation. And then there's still another form of separation, which is the separation that we conceive of in our minds on the ego level that says that we are different. Let me start this over. There is a borderland of thought. See, thought doesn't have a form. I was watching a cosmologist on television talking about cosmology, and he said the only thing that could go faster than the speed of light would be something that doesn't have form. Well, what doesn't have form? That's pretty obvious, isn't it? Thought does not have form. So thought can transcend this whole thing. The body is actually, we've talked about this here too, gross. Right? I mean, it's actually heavy. It's a lot to carry around. And as a matter of fact, when people have very near-death experiences, they very, very often describe these near-death experiences as being freedom from this thing that you had to lug around all this time over and if the body is diseased or in pain for one reason or another, then it really is heavy. And we really don't want to have to kind of deal with what a beautiful thought it is to not have to think about that. And the illustration that a lot of the near-death experience people use, it's like just taking off some old clothes and throwing them away. You know, because who needs that old pair of jeans anymore? You know, they're done. You know, you step out of that and transcend it altogether. Back to this. So it is not a place. Thought doesn't have a place. A place is something in space. And when you reach it, it is apart from time. Yesterday we had we have our seminary classes meetings for All Faith Seminary on Saturdays the day before this class. And one of our students, also from Massachusetts, was telling us about being involved in an automobile accident in which I think she was T-boned. A car came and hit her. And she just thought that she was going to die. I mean, here it was over. And she said, but it turned out to be very peaceful. For a moment, she stopped thinking. Now, that's very interesting, right? Literally stopped thinking. The ego is always thinking. You know, the Course says the ego it interprets and analyzes. The Holy Spirit accepts. The ego analyzes. Look what you're doing right now. We're all doing right now. You know, we're analyzing the hell out of everything, including the Course in Miracles. We're going to analyze this stuff until we understand it, which that's a positive side to the thing. We're going to understand it. We're going to use reason here. But she described this as it was really kind of a very beautiful experience because for some reason, here she was about to lose her body, or so she thought. Turned out, of course, obviously, she could have been here telling us about it if she had, right? Actually, I want to read for you a few descriptions. This is one of my favorite books, and it's all beat up. It's called Mystics, Masters, Saints, and Sages, which is just a little glimpse into a variety of different mystics. I want to just read a few of their experiences for you. So this first one is Robert Adams. Anybody ever hear Robert Adams? No, I didn't think so because a lot of people haven't. It's not exactly someone that a lot of people know about. His dates were 1928 to 1997. He lived here in the United States, but he was a student of Ramana Maharshi's, and he describes here, this reads you a little bit about his awakening. When I had my spiritual awakening, I was 14 years old. And this body was sitting in a classroom taking a math test. And all of a sudden, I felt myself expanding. I never left my body, which proves that the body never existed to begin with. Think about that, that's good. I felt the body expanding, and brilliant light began to come out of my heart. I happened to see this light in all directions. I had peripheral vision, and this light was really myself. It's no longer just the body at all. It was not my body and the light. There were not two. There was this light that became brighter and brighter and brighter like the light of 1,000 suns. I thought I would be burned to a crisp, but alas, I wasn't. Right? I'm going down, skipping down a little bit. And after a while, the light began to fade away, and there was no darkness. There was just a place between light and darkness, the place beyond the light. You can call it the void. The void is a very common term that's used by mystics to describe their experience. It's this nice, peaceful place of emptiness, or desert is another word that is used, or the empty Godhead, right? I was aware that I am that I am. What's when Moses has the burning bush experience and he says, who shall I say has sent me? I say, I am. That's something that just, I am in that sense just means presence, right? Just presence. I was aware of the whole universe at the same time. There was no time, there was no space, there was just I am. That's back up here. That's across that's the oneness, the whole. This is where the Course is leading us to. It's helping, and this is another word we could use up here at the top is home. And this next book that I wrote, I wanted to call it There's No Place Like Home. And that was the title until a few months ago the publishers called and said, we're changing the title to Eternal Life and A Course in Miracles. And I said, okay, because they wanted to get that word A Course in Miracles in the title. That's what that was going to be the subtitle. So they made the subtitle the title, right? I understood why it was happening. But we're still talking about home. And the thing that seems to be lacking in all of us is home, in the sense that we want to get home again. That's what this whole book is about. That's what we're doing here. That's why we're sitting here this afternoon. We're remembering home. And we got enough of the memory that's in there that we thirst to know more about this thing that we have a sense of. So let's get more connected to this. Let's get pulled back up. Let's see the mystic as someone that like we're all these little strings that are hanging down out of the oneness. Like we're kind of getting pulled back up into oneness again. For some reason, you get pulled all the way back up for a moment. In A Course in Miracles, we call that a holy instant, where you just see it, but it is an instant, which means that we can't hold it. So then we drop back down again, and we drop back down into a body. And now we may come back into the body. One of the things about a holy instant or a mystical experience is, having had one, you cannot forget it. You may forget the dynamics and the details and all, but you don't forget that you've been there. You don't forget that it did indeed happen. That much you remember, right? So if it happened, it can happen again. Part of what the Course is trying to get us to do is to get to a place where we can not just have that happen on occasion, but it becomes a consistent way of seeing and being and experiencing this thing that we call life. Right? And just, I want to do a couple more of these. This is, next one is from A.H. Almas. Are some of you familiar with A.H. Almas? Okay, he's one that you might be, he was born, I think, in 1948, and he's still very much around, and teaches out in California, I think. Okay. So he's talking about his experience here. He says, I lost the sense of being a person and became an awareness that receded infinitely, as if backward, from the familiar sense of being a person, until I recognized myself as a new kind of witnessing. That's another thing that happens. The other thing that happens is like our student yesterday in the automobile accident, and other people, Paul in the back row over there, you may could tell about later, also had an automobile accident in which for a moment there's just this sense of witness. You're just sort of seeing this thing that's happening, but it's not like you're there in it. You're an observer of what's happening rather than being immediately immersed in what's happening, right? And let me read on to the next page. So I recognize myself as a kind of witnessing. I became an immaterial witness. Not located within a personal consciousness. So there's no prejudice in this kind of witness, right? I find myself to be witnessing all of phenomena. A new obstacle arose at this point, a belief that constitutes a resistance against the new manifestation. So when this experience happens, the ego gets frightened. The ego gets frightened because it knows, I could be out here. I mean, I can lose out. That's why we're all afraid of dying. Because on the ego level, we're afraid that that's going to be it. The lights go out and nothing, right? Well, that's not true. You know, in some sense, the lights may go out, but
I know that that's not true.
you know it because you know it. You know it because you experience it as being true, right? All right. So let me go finish this paragraph. This belief interferes with the sense of witnessing without totally eliminating it. The belief is that there will be no personal life. See, that's the fear. There will be no personal life, no personal living, if there is no enmeshment in life. See, with one of A.H. Almond's major points is that if you want to know what life is, you cannot know what life is as long as he used the words enmeshed, trapped, stuck in things like politics and what's happening in the world and what's happening in the office and what's happening in the family and you got to get to a sense of objectivity about all of that. It's only when you get to a sense of objectivity about that you can then begin to have a little more insight into the eternal. Because otherwise you're caught in a dream, you're caught in the game, you're caught in the play. And all you see is the play and the game that's going on. And you don't realize that there's anything beyond that unless something can happen that gives you a little chance to get out of it for a moment. And then one more of these. This is from well, this is still H. Alma's, but a little bit later, another description. I experience myself as beyond everything, literally everything. And not just everything in my personal life. I am silent witness, vast and unchanging, beyond time and space. I am absolute still, totally uninvolved, but completely aware. This demonstrates directly that I do not need to be freed or enlightened. I am always free, always have been and will be. That's true for all of us all the time, but you don't see it within a dream. Also, I cannot be trapped, for my very identity is totally detached awareness. Totally detached awareness. I can see my personal life as a dream, but I do not have to be involved in it. I don't know that H. Amos has ever studied the Course, or he may have, but he's independent of the Course here, right? And yet he uses exactly the same phraseology I just used. It is like a movie that has a beginning and an end, but it's not me. The whole life story is like a movie that has a beginning and an end, but it's not you. I am distant from everything, yet acutely aware of everything. Okay? So the Course is just trying to help us to remember what we already know. Right? Let's just go a little bit further with this, and then we'll take our first break. Back up to the borderland of thought. Here is the meeting place where thoughts are brought together, where conflicting values meet and illusions are all laid down beside the truth, where they are judged to be untrue. This borderland is just beyond the gate of heaven. So when we're in heaven, then we're all the way there. It's total. It's complete. Here is every thought made pure and wholly simple. Here is sin denied and everything that is received instead. This idea of here is everything made pure is a common characteristic of a lot of near-death experiences. That somehow in this process of changing and leaving, all the stuff that we thought were so real and so important, all the stuff that we're holding on to, that we think that we can't let go of, you find that you can let go of because it really doesn't make any difference, because you do see that it was a dream and in a lot of cases a nightmare. And isn't it good to be free of a nightmare, right? Okay, let's take our first break.